Game over.
No one can deny the prophecy being fulfilled now. I mean, this is everything we've been talking about, the whole alien space thing. Look at this, Space Force.
Greatest spacefaring nation. The essence of the American character is to explore new horizons and to tame new frontiers. But our destiny beyond the Earth is not only a matter of national identity, but a matter of national security. So important for our military. So important, and people don't talk about it.
Now, I wonder why.
When it comes to defending America, it is not enough to merely have an American presence in space. We must have American dominance in space. So important. Very importantly, I'm hereby directing the Department of Defense and Pentagon to immediately begin the process necessary to establish a Space Force as the sixth branch of the armed forces. That's a big statement. We are going to have the Air Force and we are going to have the Space Force, separate but equal. It is going to be something so important. General Dunford, if you would carry that assignment out, I would be very greatly honored also. Where's General Dunford? General? Got it? Let's go get it, General.
When humanity is on 1,000 worlds, there will be statues of Donald John Trump on those planets and the mark of Space Force. I told you when he gave his inauguration, before he gave it, he would announce they were going to unlock the secrets of life extension, the secrets of technology, and the secrets of space.
The military term, so you know it, is a false INW, or a deceptive INW, indication and warning. And it's basically like the Gulf of Tonkin event in Vietnam. You basically exaggerate or hoax an event that then manipulates policymakers. So this was the ultimate takedown of official disclosure, which was about to happen in 1989. Got it? 26 years ago, November 1989. So here we are in 2015, and it took a lot to piece all this together, and I began to look into what the electronics were with this and what kind of technologies they might have. And one bit of insight that the prince had, he said, so he told me that the reason he was funding the abduction groups is that he was convinced that there was an existential threat from outer space. That's been the Sub Rosa plan since the 56. And that he wanted people to hate the aliens enough to pay the blood and treasure of World War III. And he also wanted it to be eschatological, where it would result in the end of the world, so that Christ would return and the good folks would go up in a flying saucer, I guess, with Christ. Now, this is what he was telling me. I'm just listening, and I'm going, whoa, this is like, woohoo. And he was completely convinced that this is what needed to happen. This sort of end of the world eschatology is the study of the end of the world event, and that's why he was putting so much money in and providing so much funding to Mack and David Jacobs and Bud Hopkins and all this. And he told me, he says, I'm going to stop funding John Mack because he's become too positive about contact, and I only want to fund people who are going to put things out there that scare people and make them hate the aliens. He said this. So I went, oh boy. Now this is connecting a dot that all of you better listen to very carefully. If it's the last thing you learn today. And that is that there is an overarching agenda that was hatched in the 50s. Remember that psychological warfare document and its value? That was hatched in between 53 and 56 to create the specter of a threat from outer space that does not exist. Werner von Braun stated on his deathbed, and we have the testimony of his assistant, that and said, they will first have the Cold War, then we decided there would be nations of concern, then global terrorism. We have this testimony from before 9/11. Then that would be followed by threats from outer space. They'll start talking about asteroids and things of this sort, but the ultimate one they're going to play is the alien threat, and it's all a lie, and it's all a hoax. But in order for the lie to work, they have had to create a body of disinformation, false information, and frightening scenarios and actual events that would be convincing to our policymakers like Reagan, convincing to the average person, and to the UFO public that consumes videos, entertainment consoles, movies, etc. And that has been the 50 to 60 year plan. Don't forget that no less a figure than Douglas MacArthur in his last address to the Congress said World War III will be interplanetary. So they have been wanting to provoke an interplanetary conflict for as long as I've been alive, and I'm no spring chicken. And, all right, so this gets into a huge problem of how people consume information and can be manipulated through fear. Because if you look at the roots of human warfare, the early days, and even today, it's people abducting a tribe's women, raping them, abusing them sexually, etc., and so on. This is all stuff that they are simulating and saying that the ETs are doing through these abduction scenarios. It is 100% being done by military special operations that are this paramilitary force. And this is the deep end of the pond. Now, when I discovered this back in 1994, now this is 21 years on, I was told by someone in the intelligence community, don't talk about that, because that's what's really dangerous for you. And it's also what will discredit you, and it will also cause them to hate you the most, because you're defanging their whole war plan. The next big war is not terrorism, it's interstellar. And if you expose that it's a hoax, it takes all the steam out of their plan.
And all of the things associated with the globe that they push that just so happen to also, in one way or another, end up equating to some form of 666. I have to be honest with you, it sure does look like, if not the great delusion itself, a big portion of it, a huge portion of it. Evolution is not even remotely plausible without the cosmology that is being pushed in the Copernican model. The whole idea of suns eventually spitting out, or, you know, in the process of forming, creating planets that cool in orbit around suns, and the whole idea that all the stars that we see out there in the heavens are suns just like our sun, and likely with planets going around them just like we have planets going around our sun, supposedly. The possibility that some of those could have life on them, to me, all of this is a big setup. And one of the things that I find interesting about the idea that flat Earth is coming out now is I believe we're getting really close to some sort of disclosure event. And you've got other people out there, of course, the Ancient Aliens crowd always pushing it. The Anunnaki and whatnot are ancient alien creators. Evolution has run its course. It's gone completely bankrupt. So even people like Professor Richard Dawkins saying, well, yeah, intelligence design, is likely the way it could come about, but it would come about in the following way, that some ancient civilization out there in the universe, who itself allegedly evolved from some sort of Darwinian evolution type of scenario, reached a high level of sophistication and came here and seeded our world with the mechanism that made evolution possible here. Of course, it just keeps pushing the problem further out. How did that other, if it requires intelligent design to kickstart evolution, then how did that other allegedly advanced civilization out there evolve? I mean, sooner or later, you're going to get to a first cause, and that first cause is going to be God. But this narrative is being pushed on us that ancient aliens have been here before. They were likely our creators, or at least helped kickstart life, and they're coming back. UFO sightings are increasing exponentially every year. UFO and alien abduction scenarios are being reported exponentially more and more every year.
There's never been a phenomenon like this. This is completely unprecedented. What was happening was that people were talking about this reproductive material. People were having sperm taken, they were having eggs taken. People report that they were having embryos injected into them and sometimes retrieved from them. I began to hear accounts of abductees who were taken into a room and their attention would be directed to a screen-like device. And on the screen, there would be a scene of normal human activity. A picnic, kids playing ball, guys standing around a grill, people talking to each other. And they'll hear in their mind, can you tell the difference between you and us? And the person will look at the screen and say, no, everybody looks the same to me. And I'll say, see, isn't that wonderful? Isn't that great? Soon we will all be together. Soon it will be wonderful. Soon everybody will be happy. Now, you hear that once. It's not a pattern. You hear that once, you just discard it. Interesting, who knows? But when you begin to hear it over and over again, then suddenly it has different meaning. This is from other people who are not aware of this testimony. And then I began to understand that what they were telling these abductees, what these beings were telling these abductees, is that ultimately this is an integration program into the society, not with gray aliens most likely, but with these hybrids who look quite human.
And you got people like Stephen M. Greer out there saying, hey, disclosure is imminent. It's just around the corner. It's going to happen. Although he's been saying some stuff that's rather interesting lately, that he even believes there's going to be a counterfeit version of it. That we have the technology right now that human beings could fake UFOs with our own technology, make people believe that it's alien spacecraft, but it could very well just be black budget DARPA type projects, developed in Area 51, human engineered aircraft that are being used by our government or the governments of the world to deceive people that it's really aliens. He's warning about that. To me, I don't believe, even before I got into the flat earth, I didn't believe in ancient aliens anyway, or aliens in other worlds. I believed in all along that we're dealing with fallen angel activity and demonic activity and things of that nature. And yet still we have to acknowledge that we've had constant media bombardment, both in sort of mainstream news as well as in movies and pop culture and all kinds of stuff, always pushing this alien agenda, people from other worlds out there. And I mean, we've even had US presidents perhaps preparing us in advance for what they may or may not know is coming, and setting the stage for all this.
I couldn't help at one point in my discussions privately with General Secretary Gorbachev, when you stop to think that we're all God's children wherever we may live in the world, I couldn't help but say to him, just think how easy his task and mine might be in these meetings that we held if suddenly there was a threat to this world from some other species, from another planet, outside in the universe. We'd forget all the little local differences that we have between our countries, and we would find out once and for all that we really are all human beings here on this earth together. In our obsession with antagonisms of the moment, we often forget how much unites all the members of humanity. Perhaps we need some outside universal threat to make us recognize this common bound. I occasionally think how quickly our differences worldwide would vanish if we were facing an alien threat from outside this world. And yet, I ask you, is not an alien force already among us? What could be more alien to the universal aspirations of our peoples than war and the threat of war? I think maybe I'd answer it this way. I keep, in my frustration sometimes, you know, actually, if you count some of the things going on in smaller countries and all, there have been about 114 wars since World War II. But I've often wondered, what if all of us in the world discovered that we were threatened by a power from outer space, from another planet? Wouldn't we all of a sudden find that we didn't have any differences between us at all? We were all human beings, citizens of the world, and wouldn't we come together to fight that particular threat?
We know now we live in an ever-expanding universe. We know that there are billions of stars and planets literally out there, and the universe is getting bigger. We know from our fancy telescopes that just in the last 2 years, more than 20 planets have been identified outside our solar system that seem to be far enough away from their suns and dense enough that they might be able to support some form of life. So it makes it increasingly less likely that we're alone.
Oh, you're trying to give me a hint that there are aliens.
No, I'm trying to tell you I don't know.
Oh.
But if we were visited someday, I wouldn't be surprised. I just hope that it's not like Independence Day.
Yeah, right.
That it's a conflict.
Well, now we have friendly
Maybe the only way to unite this incredibly divided world of ours. They're out there. We better think of how all the differences among people on Earth would seem small if we felt threatened by a space invader. That's the whole theory of independence.
You're right.
So the thing about flat Earth that really intrigues me is it nullifies all of it. If we're in a terrarium, well, there's a creator. And so if there's a creator, then immediately evolution is demolished. And the whole notion of ancient aliens goes out the window too, because everything above us is way closer and way smaller than what we've been taught. So anyway, that's my take on the likelihood that the Copernican spinning heliocentric globular Earth model could very likely be a massively huge part, if not the central part, of the strong delusion written about in Scripture concerning the last days. But if you go back and listen to what Stephen M. Greer was saying, he made reference to the testimony of Dr. Carol Rawson. And, you know, it's important to point out that this interview was done prior to 9/11/2001. Listen to what she has to say.
When I was a corporate manager of Fairchild Industries in 1974 through 77, I met the late Dr. Werner von Braun in early 74. At that time, von Braun was dying of cancer, but he assured me that he would live a few more years in order to tell me about the game that was being played, that game being the effort to weaponize space, to control the Earth from space and space itself. Von Braun's purpose in life during the last years of his life, his dying years, was to educate the public and decision makers about why space-based weapons are a dumb, dangerous, destabilizing, too costly, unnecessary, unworkable, undesirable idea. The strategy that Werner von Braun taught me was that first the Russians are going to be considered to be the enemy. In fact, when I met him in 74, they were the enemy, the identified enemy. We were told that they had killer satellites. We were told that they were coming to get us and control us, the dirty commies, that whole story. First, the Russians were the enemy against whom we're going to build space-based weapons. Then terrorists would be identified, and that was soon to follow. We heard a lot about terrorism. Then we were going to identify third world country crazies. We now call them nations of concern. But he said that would be the third enemy against whom we would be needing to build space-based weapons. And the next enemy was asteroids. Now, at this point, he kind of chuckled the first time he said it. Asteroids, against asteroids, we're going to build space-based weapons. So it was funny then. And the funniest one of all was against what he called aliens, extraterrestrials. That would be the final card. And over and over and over during the 4 years that I knew him and was giving his speeches for him, he would bring up that last card. And remember, Carol, the last card is the alien card. We're going to have to build space-based weapons against aliens. And all of it, he said, is a lie. Well, at the time, I kind of laughed when he said asteroids, and when he said extraterrestrials, I knew I wasn't going to deal with that subject. And now we hear in the news just today, this week, that they've slid in another enemy. Only this time we're going to protect our satellites. In other words, we have to have some reason to spend these trillions, to waste these dollars on a space-based weapon system, and they're all lies. And I will testify before the Congress under oath about everything I have said and more. Thank you.
What if Wernher von Braun at the end of his life was making a confession of sorts and trying to warn her and telling her to tell everybody else, and perhaps warning others that, look, what's coming, whatever it is that they may have had information or been privy to, is fake. It's a fraud. It's not real as it pertains to visitations from outer space. I mean, maybe there's a good reason why he had, whoever he left behind after he died, had them put Psalm 19:1 on his tombstone, of all things. And for Wernher von Braun, of all people, right? Psalm 19:1, describing the firmament. It's definitely one of those things that make you go,
So, what's the motivation? Why would they lie if that's the case? Well, first, to get people to doubt Yahuwah's word by destroying the very foundation of our Bible, Genesis, specifically the creation account, number one. 2, set up a new paradigm where God is out and science is in. Evolution removes Yahuwah from the equation. 3, when evolution finally runs its course and becomes utterly bankrupt, introduce the idea of intelligent design, but deny the true designer his due credit and place it rather on ancient aliens. Promote the ancient alien theme as much as possible in all forms of media by perpetuating the concept of Earth as a tiny blue marble orbiting an average sun in an average galaxy among trillions of other galaxies in an ever-expanding universe. With so much potential for life to exist in such a vast expanse, the idea of alien scientists being our creators seems a lot more plausible over time and heavy indoctrination. And 5, the stage is set for our alien creators to return and bestow upon us their miracles, signs, and wonders in order to convince us all the more that all religions are false. We then put our trust in them. Finally, when Christ does return, we are all convinced that he is the enemy and our united world gathers together to make war with him, according to Psalm 2, Revelation 16, and Revelation 19.